We shall now speak about industrialization, but I'll have to start industrialization by returning to collectivization, because collectivization was the very center, the linchpin of industrialization. Let me explain how. The reasons for collectivization were that peasants were the majority of the country. Communists considered them as backward class. They had private property, which gave them some independence, but at the same time, the Bolshevik state depended on them for food. That had to be changed. But Stalin's vision was much bigger than just turning peasants into obedient and dependent laborers in state enterprises. The purpose of collectivization, the main purpose of collectivization, was to channel the human and material resources of the countryside to the construction of manufacturing facilities. This would turn the Soviet Union into a strong industrial power. Stalin designed this policy personally, and he presented it to the Central Committee plenum on 9th July 1928. At that plenum, he also said that with the development of socialism, class struggle had to intensify. This would be very useful for him. The way to industrialization lay through 5-year plans. It was envisaged that there would be several 5-year plans, and they all had to be worked out beforehand. And here is several posters which show what actually was envisaged. The poster on the left says fulfill 5-year plan in 4 years. The poster on the right says 5-year plan, and a capitalist is laughing at it and says that this is a fantasy. And then the lower part of the same poster is the plan is fulfilled in 4 years, and the capitalist is very unhappy. What was a 5-year plan? It was a plan which defined targets, the number and type of industries to be built. But there was no estimate of financial and material resources which were necessary. The first 5-year plan was introduced in 1928. It was very ambitious, but targets were soon rejected as too modest. So the target figures were increased by 50%, and then doubled, and then trebled. And then the call was that the 5-year plan had to be fulfilled in 3 years. From 1929, collectivization became a part of industrialization. Why the haste? Well, it was natural, because revolution in the West did not happen, and this was finally recognized by communists. There were signs of wars gathering both in the West and in the East. So Stalin needed a military machine, and very fast. But he was not an economist, so for him, industrialization was a fortress to be captured, and his weapons in the fight for that fortress were political campaigns and enthusiasm. The enthusiasm was sincere. The magnitude of the plans caught the imagination of workers. Stakhanovites were the workers who exceeded their norms of production. Shock workers were the workers who worked longer hours and faster and managed to fulfill their tasks in record time. One of the main vehicles of industrialization was exports of grain, because these exports gave the funds for buying the equipment. A lot of foreign equipment was bought abroad. The Dnepro gas, for example, this was the hydroelectric power station, and it was the pride of Soviet industrialization. In fact, the machinery for it was supplied by the Germans, the Krupp, by the United States, General Motors, by Czechoslovakia. The whole project cost about $400 million. Enormous amount. So this was all that was produced by the grain, which was produced by the kolkhozes. But there was something else that collectivization gave to industrialization. This was labor. First of all, there were many people from villages who either escaped or just came to the cities. They were not highly qualified workers, so they were ready to work just for rations. But more importantly, there was this virtually slave prison labor. It was free. Socialist construction, socialist industrialization could not have happened without free labor. Here you see the pictures of that prison labor, and one example of that was that the workers who built the Moscow-Volga Canal were all prisoners. The camp was specifically created for them to work on this project. In 1936, it housed 192,000 prisoner workers. But the results of socialist construction were enormous. They were really impressive. Metallurgical, automobile factories, chemical factories. Look at the map. The whole of the European part of Russia and even some parts of southern Siberia are covered with this construction sites of Soviet industrialization. There were such proud projects as Dnepro gas, which I mentioned earlier. There was Magnitogorsk metallurgical factory. There was Nizhny Novgorod automobile plant. All these plants and factories were very well advertised in the newspapers and on film. The growth of production was incredible. The production of cast iron increased from 1928 to 1932 by 188%. Automobile production increased by 3,000%. The production of steel increased by 137%. Incredible. There's no doubt that both investment of capital and the sacrifice had to produce such results. As Stalin said, industrialization was a fortress. They say that communists, particularly communist workers in industry, cannot master chemical formula and technical knowledge generally. This is not true. There are no such fortresses in the world that Bolsheviks cannot capture.